the cover. Can he do it? Kick out at two. Just sweet.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, welcome to the Curtain Call Podcast, the best wrestling podcast on YouTube and Spotify and everywhere else you listen to. Thank you for joining. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you so much. If you're watching on YouTube, please consider dropping a subscription and also liking the video. It really, really helps us out a lot. And we're going back in time. We're going to jump in the DeLorean with Marty and Doc, and we're going back in time to WrestleMania 1, all the way back. And we want to make this a trend. If you guys want us to review every WrestleMania leading up to this newest one, or if you want to comment down below specific ones we should do, we can do that as well. But let us know what you guys think about this. We're very excited to jump into this. I go by Irish Neep. That is JR. JR, you have anything to say before we start off?
No, sir. I'm ready to get up in it. Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to do the things a little different this episode around. Normally, JR's kind of the note guy on the podcast, so he takes all the notes and he kind of runs down the card and throws it my way. I'm going to flip the script a little bit. JR, I want you to read off what we got, and then you give me your thoughts first. The reason I'm doing this is because obviously you're older than me. You were more around towards, and not hey, not that old. I didn't say old. You're older than me. All right, let's get that straight. So you've been a fan a lot longer than I have, just because you're older than me. I do pride myself of knowing a lot about the eras before me, but you were kind of there for more of time than I was. So I want your thoughts first, and then when you're done with your thoughts, pass it to me, and I'll kind of give my newer generation look at it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. This WrestleMania was in 1985, and I saw it at the Richfield Coliseum on closed circuit television. It was live from New York City. There was about 20,000 people in attendance. It was the first annual ever WrestleMania extravaganza that you want to do. To give you a back history for those that don't know, this all started with Rockin' Wrestling and MTV when Vince McMahon had a vision of bringing entertainment and wrestling and combining them together. And so we got WrestleMania. We had commentators was Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body Ventura. Mean Gene Okerlund did the segments backstage alongside of Lord Alfred Hayes. For those of you that remember WWF back in the days, will remember Lord Alfred Hayes, his English accent. How can you forget that? Obviously, Howard Finkel was the ring announcer. Billy Martin was a former Yankees head coach and player who ended up being the ring announcer for the main event. Joey Morella, Pat Patterson, those were your referees. Special timekeeper for the main event was Liberace. And then you also had Muhammad Ali as like a special enforcer in the back alongside with the Rockettes. So the first match, we had King Kong Bundy versus Special Delivery Jones, ST Jones. It was a quick match, 9 seconds. It actually held the record for many years. As far as the quickest match, I believe the one that beat him was Kevin Nash beating Bob Backlund for the WWF title back in Madison Square Garden in the early 90s. David Sammartino versus Brutus Barbeefcake. That one finished in a no contest. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat fought Matt Bourne. That finished by Ricky winning with a flying crossbody. We had the Junkyard Dog in an Intercontinental Intercontinental title match versus, oh my God, who was it? It was with Jimmy Hart. Why am I drawing a blank? Greg the Hammer Valentine. Greg the Hammer Valentine. Yeah, then we had the tag team title match, which was Nikolai Volkov and U.S. Express. Greg the Hammer Valentine. By the way, the Junkyard Dog won that match by countout, but didn't win the belt. He never held a major title in the WWE.
Right.
Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik beat the U.S. Express for their titles. U.S. Express was Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo, Bray Wyatt's uncle and father. Then we had the Body Slam Challenge match, Andre the Giant and Big John Studd for $15,000. Andre obviously slammed Big John, took the money, threw it up in the air. We had the women's match, Wendy Richter versus Lanny Kai. Lanny Kai was the champion. Wendy Richter regained her title at that WrestleMania. Cyndi Lauper was in the corner of Wendy Richter, and the fabulous Moolah in the Champions Corner. And then we had the main event, which was Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Rowdy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, with Cowboy Bob Orton on their side and Jimmy Superfly Snuka on Hogan's side. You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. And this is one of the few times you're going to hear me say this. I'll probably say it maybe two more other times on WrestleManias. This was by far one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. And I'm gonna say it like this. I'm gonna tell you why. Number one, it was the first time that you had celebrities interacting so much with the WWE, and the atmosphere built was so big. I remember the Saturday night's main event prior to it, and I just could not wait to see Hulk Hogan get his hands on Roddy Piper and Mr. T get their hands on Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. I remember even me watching it on closed circuit on this big screen in the Richfield Coliseum in Cleveland, the buzz that was around town. And this was during a time in the 80s where wrestling was shown on when they gave the news and they talked about the sports, they talked about wrestling. Especially when Ric Flair was in town, because he was the traveling champion, the NWA heavyweight champion. And remember, WrestleMania was a throw off to Starrcade, what Starrcade was doing. If you watch the first Starrcade, it's a long show. Why? Because they had every single title in the National Wrestling Alliance being defended. Titles that are no longer in existence today, but there was 3 or 4 heavyweight champions, but there was only one world heavyweight champion. Right. So this was WWE's way of going back at this. And you know what? At the time, it had over 1 million viewerships. It was the largest. First of all, it was the first pay-per-view event. And it was the largest in the pay-per-view television history in the U.S. for years until the WWE broke that record again. To me, this was amazing WrestleMania, man. So I'm a little biased, but I loved it, man. Yeah. No, there's a discussion to be made that it's the best, if one of the best, if not the best, 100%. And just looking, the show was great, but just looking at that main event, all the talent in that main event, whether they were in the ring or, beside the ring or wherever. And like you said, just looking back now, looking back at the commentary team, the backstage, interviewer, the announcer, all that, man, it really was like the golden age of wrestling. When you look back, so many legends that we know today were in their prime or starting out or whatever during that show. And man, just looking back, it's really something special, honestly. Like, it really is. You see all of the forefathers of nowadays wrestling in that show, on that show. And it's arguably the best of all time. I would agree with you on that. Yeah, I've seen it so many times, but yesterday, just goofing around with my youngest son here, who is 17, I put it on. I put on WrestleMania 1, and he's very honest when it comes to wrestling. Very, very brute with you, tell you how it is. If he doesn't care if what's the big hype, he'll tell you if he doesn't like it or not. But he came along, and when he saw it, he was really shocked, especially when the main event came on, because for the first maybe 5 minutes or 3 minutes or so, they didn't even throw a punch. But the atmosphere was so intense that when that punch first, when you go back and watch it and you start off the match, the person that starts off first is Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff versus Hulk Hogan. The crowd is in an uproar. Then all of a sudden, Paul Orndorff turns and tags Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper comes in hot and fired. And then people are screaming, and you see Mr. T on the outside telling Hogan, please let me in, tag me. And the crowd is going insane. Yeah. And when Hulk Hogan was about to lock up, and he turns and looks at Mr. T and finally sees him and tags him in, man, that place, the atmosphere was so strong. You could sense it. And not for nothing, but Mr. T was great in that match. Yeah. I mean, he sold amazingly. He really did a good match. He really did a good job at it. He also did a good job in WrestleMania 2 as well. And he also fought, I don't know if you remember, Jordan, but later on after WrestleMania 1, Mr. T ended up fighting on Saturday night's main event in a boxing match against Cowboy Bob Orton.
Yep.
and Cowboy Bob Orton lost in the 4th round. Mr. T really did a good job. Really did a good job. And when you go back and watch videos, you see how when they talked to Hogan and Piper at the time, they said that Mr. T really put in the work. He really wanted to go in there and it showed. He didn't go in there trying to do flips and stuff like that. He did what he was known of doing, which was a shoot fighter almost, and incorporated some wrestling aspects in it. And it looked like somebody that's never wrestled before get in the ring, but was fighting. And he sold very well, man.
Do you think now, like nowadays, looking back over all the WrestleManias, all the years, all the celebrity appearances, all the maybe people that weren't wrestlers that got in and had a match, do you think he reigns still in like maybe top 3 of best celebrity people from more of a little bit of the outside world coming into the show and performing? Do you think he's top 3?
He's got to be. He's got to be. You know, when you look at people that's never been in the business and come into the business and pick it up, the first person you think of is Kurt Angle.
Right.
No, but Kurt Angle was a wrestler.
Right.
So he had the leg up on the competition. Some people will say, oh, Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey did amazing.
Yeah.
But she was a fighter. She also does judo. She had a leg up on it. Go ahead.
Bad Bunny, where does he rank? Be honest.
To me, there isn't anyone better than Bad Bunny. And it's not because I'm from Puerto Rico, but Benito is special. And that's the truth. He did a Canadian destroyer. He really wanted to go. He moved. And I tell you this because I follow the Hispanic culture, the Puerto Rican culture. I'm from Puerto Rico. The music I listen to is Puerto Rican culture music. He moved from Puerto Rico to the Performance Center in Orlando and trained.
Yeah.
And stayed there training, was the first one in and the first one out. And this is something that Damian Priest said on a podcast in Puerto Rico, that he was really shocked on how seriously he took this. And that when he was around The Miz and The Miz was talking to him, he said he was laser focused on what The Miz was saying on how to do these moves. Yeah. So, but to answer your question, Mr. T's got to be up there, man. He's got to be up there. What are your thoughts on it?
No, I would definitely agree. Like I said, Ronda was a big one, but you're correct. She already had a little bit of the fighting background. It's got, Mr. T is definitely, I'd say Mr. T, Bad Bunny, and maybe we're forgetting somebody else. But yeah, no doubt in my mind that Mr. T deserves in the top 3 100% because he did a phenomenal job.
And I better not hear anybody comment David Arquette. Please don't.
Hey, the best WCW champion of all time, man.
Do not go there. My favorite belt is the big gold belt.
All time.
I have a replica of it. It's my favorite belt. To me, it's beautiful. When I think of a world heavyweight champion, I think of the big gold belt. To see them strap that big gold belt around his waist was very tasteful. So I don't want to hear that. But yeah, Mr. T did one heck of a job. Lawrence Taylor did a good job as well. He main evented WrestleMania. And he did a really good job. Bam Bam Bigelow said in an interview that they worked hard. He worked hard, and he was another one that paid attention and really, really wanted to succeed at it. And he did a great job. You also have other people that came into the business like Mongo McMichael and Brock Lesnar and stuff like that. But they all had some sort of a fighting background. So when I think of it, you got to have Mr. T up there. But it was a great pay-per-view. Hey, man, the U.S. Express was so over, man. My goodness, man. Yeah. I believe Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda were probably the best wrestlers in the WWF at the time. Shortly after that, when they got their titles, they regained their titles, and then they lost it again to Beefcake and Valentine, and they both went over to the NWA. That's when Windham ended up becoming a member of the Four Horsemen. But my goodness, man, the U.S. Express was so good, man. They were really, really good.
So I'm going to give you said it's the best WrestleMania of all time, so I kind of have an understanding what your rating of it's going to be. If we could slap a rating. After looking back, knowing what I know about the people and where they're going to go and, you know, the heights that they're going to reach and just the show overall, I'm going 4.5 out of 5 on this one. It was almost perfection. I think it would be perfection if I was around during that time to really feel the, you know, impact and what it was. But even looking back, I can understand that this was a monumental moment show. So I'd probably give it a 5 if I was around during that time. But 4.5 for me for this show overall. Great matches, great talent. The celebrities, you know, it didn't feel forced like nowadays it does, where they're like it all blended in very well when they brought in Mr. T and you know, but it was a good show, man. Damn near perfect.
Yeah, you know, when I look back at it, I of course I have to give it a 5. When I look back at it with the knowledge that we know now as following wrestling for so long, I can see anybody giving it a 4.5. Absolutely. And you can't say, oh, you're crazy about that. No, I can completely agree with that number. You know, I'm all about storylines. I love storylines. And WWF was known for that. Shortly after the 85 WrestleMania, that's when the big 4 pay-per-views started, all in the 80s, the late 80s. You had your Royal Rumble. We had Survivor Series first, Royal Rumble, and then you had your SummerSlam. And then it became the Big 5 when they added the King of the Ring, and then they took it away and put the Money in the Bank in its place. But the storylines would take place within these pay-per-views, and they were able to expand it so much, and every now and then throw in a Saturday night's main event.
Right.
And they kept the storyline super, super crisp, man. I mean, they followed it right down the line that you couldn't wait to see these guys. WrestleMania 1, to me, was a 5. I can see somebody giving it a 4.5. WrestleMania 2 was not a 5 for me. We'll save that discussion for another day. But it was great, man. Hogan was Hogan. Andre was Andre. And seeing people like Big John Studd and Junkyard Dog and it was just a different atmosphere. You know, nobody came out to music except for Hogan, Piper, and the U.S. Express.
Right. Which is weird. You know, looking back, like now, for me, I've always known music or like at least a little tune or something. You know, I watch some old stuff and at least I have a little tune or something. So that threw me off because I've seen WrestleMania 1 before years back and stuff. But going back for this episode, I was able to notice more and take in more, being a little older and stuff. And I was like, there's no music like at all. I'm like, that's strange. But I didn't hate it. Like it didn't feel off. Like for what they were doing in that time, and the energy of the crowd really did a lot of it, honestly. But they didn't need music.
No, they didn't. And you could look around the ring, and there was so many photographers and stuff that they couldn't go out to the outside of the ring and do things. So everything was set in the square circle, and which to me a lot of times makes a match from being a 5 to a 2. Because if a lot of stuff happens on the outside, okay, it's cool, but well, whatever. But when everything takes place on the inside, it makes the match more like, wow. You know, I remember, like, for example, I remember that months prior, we were in the Richfield Coliseum. WWF was in town, and Hulk Hogan used to come out to Eye of the Tiger. Him being in the Rocky movie, he would come out to Eye of the Tiger. The U.S. Express will come out to Real American. Yeah. That's what they came out to. So all of a sudden, when they started showing it on TV, where they would do the TV appearances, Hogan was coming out to Real American, and it fits him, man. It just fit him. It was good, man.
That's your GOAT, huh?
That's my GOAT.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
You know, and you know, it's a discussion that people get into. Oh, he's not the greatest wrestler. He's not. He's not the greatest wrestler.
No,
you're absolutely right. You know, I can name 3 off the top of my head: Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels. You know, these guys are great wrestlers. Steamboat, but Hulk Hogan by far had the personality, you know, to do this. Can you imagine what would have happened if Hogan would have never been the guy?
Yeah.
You know, it's a discussion that people could take. We probably wouldn't have had a WrestleMania, man.
Probably
you know,
not.
it's a lot of things that this WrestleMania was something groundbreaking. It led to the WrestleMania 2, which wasn't a huge success. That's why Vince was scared to do the WrestleMania 3. And WrestleMania 3 is what catapulted them into the stratosphere. But WrestleMania 1 started it all. It was a great showing. There was new talent. You got to understand that at WrestleMania 1, a lot of these guys had just recently left the World Class Championship Wrestling, Mid-South. They had just left these places like a couple weeks prior. So this was the first time that he had these major guys in there. The Junkyard Dog wasn't in the WWF a long time before WrestleMania. So this was something that happened real quick. And, man, those guys made an impact, man. From there, you had the Rocket Wrestling show on cartoons and the wrestlers, you name it. It was on and popping from there, man.
Yeah. Last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Because was your whole family into wrestling like you were?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So how was the overall vibe of the wrestling community and just people after the show? What was kind of the aftermath after that? Was it like everyone knew at the time this was a thing and then like or was it more, it took a little bit to kind of breathe and grow into the WrestleMania that we know? Or did people know and were excited about it right after it happened? What was kind of the mood?
I think my dad was a huge wrestling fan. Coming from Puerto Rico, watching Carlos Colon, Abdul the Butcher, he was huge into wrestling. My uncle, my mom's brother, huge into wrestling. So my dad will hold these events where people will come over. He had a friend down south that he would send us tapes of like the Jim Crockett Cup, and my dad would send him tapes of superstars from WWF. So that's how I was able to know a lot about the NWA and WWF. Shortly after this, the atmosphere had to be buzzing. Obviously, I was a lot younger, so you don't have internet and things like that. But the atmosphere had to be buzzing because I remember that not too long after that, we had the Saturday night's main event. And the Saturday night's main event, if you look it up, drew a 9.8 rating. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Raw gets 1.5 now.
Right.
The Super Bowl gets 6 points.
Yeah.
It had a 9.8, almost a 10 on a Saturday night after 11 o'clock.
Right.
For a wrestling show.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, they used to show it on the news. They would show highlights of WrestleMania during the sports, after they gave the sports of football, whatever they would say. And in wrestling tonight, Hulk Hogan was there, and they show clips.
Yeah.
No, NWA didn't do that, man.
Right.
Vince McMahon was thinking, his mind was in 2000 during the 80s, man. So the buzz was a big hype. It was a really, really big hype. And people couldn't wait. And when Vince announced Survivor Series, which, of course, once again, it was in Cleveland, Survivor Series, the first one. I was there. It was something different. You didn't see 10 guys tag team 10 against 10 and 5 against 5. You rarely saw that. So and it really set things up. It kept setting things up. But man, Jordan, I'm telling you, man, if you've never witnessed it, I really can't explain it. Look, man, I've heard a pop of Stone Cold. I've heard the pop of The Rock. I've been in arenas when they come out and it pops. The loudest pops that I've ever heard in my life, hands down, Hulk Hogan and the Road Warriors.
Yeah.
When WrestleMania was in Indianapolis that we went to, and the Road Warriors made their return to WWF after being in the NWA, I remember I couldn't I kept hearing a buzzing noise because it was so loud. When Hogan came out, they say it all the time. Oh, it's shaking from the rafters. No, you could really feel the building shake with the roar. The 80s was special, man. Yeah. 80s wrestling was special. There was, you go back, there weren't no politically correct terms, man. They said how things were back then. I mean, Jesse the Body Ventura in Tito Santana's match was calling him Chico Santana and the Flying Burrito. Yeah. They wouldn't say stuff like that nowadays. To me, I used to hate Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yeah.
Why is he saying that? And that's what was great about wrestling in the 80s. You hated the bad guys, you loved the good guys. There was no, I love MJF because he's such a good talker. Then he's not doing his job and being a bad guy.
Right.
You hated the bad guys, you loved the good guys. WrestleMania 1, to me, will go down into history as probably one of the greatest WrestleManias ever. There's one that happened a few years after that. That's probably the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Right. And I think that if you ask anybody, they'll probably agree with that one. But this one was the start of something great. It's what all brought us into this love that we have of professional wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that does it. Like I said, let us know what you thought. If you've seen WrestleMania 1, if not, I can speak for both of us. We definitely recommend you going back on Peacock, or if you're overseas and you still have the WWE Network, definitely go check it out. But yeah, let us know if you want this to continue, if you want us to do all the WrestleManias, or if you want to comment down below a specific one you want us to do, we can do that as well. But yeah, we want to try and do a lot of these ramping up to the newest WrestleMania, because there's a lot of good WrestleManias to look back on. And there's also a lot of not so good WrestleManias that you can almost laugh at. So I think we're going to have fun either way, whether it's a good or bad one. I think we're going to have a good time reviewing them. So let us know which ones you want us to review. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching and listening along with us. We appreciate it. Too Sweet as always. And JR, just take it out.
We always kick out at 2.
Peace.